Over 70 previous Eurovision contestants have signed an open letter calling for Israel and its media organisation KAN to be banned from the 2025 edition. The EBU is the broadcaster responsible for organising the contest. The letter is directly addressed to them. It states, "We believe in the unifying power of music, which is why we refuse to allow music to be used as a tool to whitewash crimes against humanity. Last year, we were appalled that the EBU allowed Israel to participate while it continued its genocide in Gaza, broadcast live for the world to see. The result was disastrous. Rather than acknowledging the widespread criticism and reflecting on its own failures, the EBU responded by doubling down, granting total impunity to the Israeli delegation while repressing other artists and delegations, making the 2024 edition the most politicized, chaotic, and unpleasant in the competition's history. The 2024 edition of the contest saw widespread boycotts and protests at the decision to allow Israel to compete. That year, their contestant was singer Eden Golan, who had to have her song lyrics edited to remove references to the October the 7th attacks. Over 11,000 people protested that event held in Malmö, Sweden, including Swedish activist Greta Thunberg. Moving on to 2025, the Israeli contestant has been chosen as Yuval Raphael, the survivor of the attack on the Nova Music Festival as part of the Al-Aqsa flood incursion into Israel by Palestinian forces. One of the controversial positions taken by the EBU with regards to the participation of Israel is the perceived hypocrisy of allowing them to compete whilst banning Russia, even since the country's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. This was called out directly in the open letter. By continuing to platform the representation of the Israeli state, the EBU is normalizing and whitewashing its crimes. The EBU has already demonstrated that it is capable of taking measures, as in 2022 when it expelled Russia from the competition. We don't accept this double standard regarding Israel. And they're absolutely right. It seems to be that the continual narrative, doesn't matter whether it's Keir Starmer immediately calling out war crimes by Russia and then being able to speak out the other side of his mouth with regards to Israel. The same is true when it comes to international broadcasters and broadcasting cooperatives like the EBU. When it comes to Russia, it's unequivocal. It's unequivocal. We absolutely must condemn. We must exclude them. The sanctions start because they are not outside of the Western sphere of influence. When it comes to Israel, though, we have to let them defend themselves, regardless of whether the war crimes are as widely broadcast and widely known as Russia's are. It's a total double standard. I absolutely agree. Now, the EBU has continued to treat Israel's broadcaster with impunity. In 2024, KAN described Norwegian band Goethe as the sons and daughters of Amalek, a biblical reference that was invoked by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to describe the Palestinians during his declaration of war. KAN is well aware of its role to use cultural events as Eurovision to promote its Hasbara agenda. In December last year, in response to a bill proposed by Israeli Communications Minister Shlomo Karhi to privatize the network, the international news desk editor at a KAN-owned radio station in Israel openly stated that the song contest has long been more than just a musical event. It is a critical arena for Israeli advocacy, and the privatization would be a gift to BDS. He went on to say this: "It is a way to assert our presence on a continent that expelled us 80 years ago and is trying to do it again today through radical left-wing organizations. Does Karhi really want to give the radical left in Europe this prize? Because that's exactly what he's doing." Indeed, many claims that Eurovision is non-political are hard to believe when countries have historically used the contest to promote and signal national narratives, and countries often vote along political lines too. That, however, has not prevented the EBU from censoring pro-Palestine voices historically. This has included cutting out audience boos of Israel during the 2024 edition, asking Irish entry Bambi Thug to remove pro-Palestine and pro-ceasefire messages from their performance, and previously having banned Palestinian flags from the show altogether, although this ban has now been overturned. In response to the open letter, Martin Green, CBE, director of the Eurovision Song Contest, said this: "We understand the concerns and deeply held views around the current conflict in the Middle East. The EBU is not immune to global events, but together with our members, it is our role to ensure that the contest remains, at its heart, a universal event that promotes connections, diversity and inclusion through music. We all aspire to keep the Eurovision Song Contest positive and inclusive and aspire to show the world as it could be rather than how it necessarily is. As a reminder, the EBU is an association of public service broadcasters, not governments, who are all eligible to participate in the Eurovision Song Contest every year if they meet the requisite requirements." Stephen, do you believe that the EBU's position is defensible?
No, it's completely indefensible. It's also sort of like deep liberal claptrap, isn't it? We're committed to universal values of inclusivity and so on and so forth. And yet at the same time, as you said in the piece, Russia is excluded while Israel is allowed to remain in the competition. I mean, I'm actually really surprised that they've been able to sustain it this far. As you said, or as I said in the letter, the previous performers, 2024 was really chaotic. It was. I remember watching it. There was a boycott. I'd meant to boycott it. I was in a Butlins with my brother. He wanted to watch it, and I thought, I better watch it because we're going to cover it on the show anyway, because it's obviously going to be chaos. And indeed, it was. Crowds booing, flags stripped off members of the audience, fights between the bands backstage. Nothing in there about the spirit of universality and so on and so forth, but rather a show that really showed the world the level of feeling that there was about Gaza at that point, a level of feeling which has incidentally only grown. So it seems that the EBUs has made a really bad mistake in not trying to get ahead of that for this competition. And the effect of it in this case will be that someone who was a survivor of October the 7th is probably going to find herself booed on stage again, or is going to be greeted with a sea of Palestinian flags, which you are now allowed to carry. Which, if I were Israel, which I'm really glad I'm not, I would be thinking about that person's well-being and safety, and wondering whether it was worth putting someone, presumably quite traumatized, out on stage to perform in front of a crowd which is hostile towards the country that she comes from because of the genocide that they're committing in Gaza. So I don't really know what the EBU's playing at here. I do quite like the idea that this year there's also some solidarity from previous performers. I think it's really great that it's hard for people in the performance world to take a stand on political issues, because so much of their income depends on a wide audience, the possibility of collaborations and of contracts for advertising and this kind of thing. And those are the sorts of things that can easily disappear when you become political. So I think it is great that there are previous performers who've signed this letter, put themselves out there, hopefully enabling the performers who are going to be appearing the weekend after this one in the competition to help them to feel like they have some backing or some courage in making their own displays of protest. I mean, and there were plenty of displays of protest by performers last year. They were, of course, unfortunately, many of them edited out of the cut. So yeah, I think it's going to be a messy show. I mean, I guess it wouldn't surprise me if Israel was quietly dropped after the semi-final. That would be a sort of weak, technocratic, strategic solution to the problem. But yeah, the EBU really ought to have taken a stand of the kind it took against Russia, and the hypocrisy and inconsistency is just apparent to everybody.
What's funny to me about this whole thing is we're talking about the European Song Contest and including a state in the Middle East in the European Song Contest. I mean, like a Eurovision Song Contest, rather. Obviously, it's European in nature. Of course, I understand that there are other non-European countries who do compete as well. But Stephen, what do you think the inclusion of Israel, kind of prima facie, in a what is supposed to be a European contest, says about its relationship broadly with the West?
Yeah, I mean, it says quite a lot, and it's interesting that there's I think it's only two non-European countries that are included, which are Israel and Australia, two settler colonial states, but extensions of Europe in that very obvious respect. In a sense, it says that about Europe and its relation to colonies. I actually don't mind if more countries are included. I would like to see the whole Middle East included. I'd like to see, why not make it a global competition? Why restrict it to to Europe. But given that it is restricted to Europe, it's pretty telling that those two countries are allowed to be in it, whereas a country like Lebanon, which is geographically even nearer, just isn't.